Have you ever looked at your life and wondered why you keep repeating patterns you know are hurting you? For example, why you overthink texts, fear rejection, stay in unhealthy relationships, or feel crushed by criticism, even when part of you knows better? Or those moments when you know you might be overreacting, but it feels almost impossible not to react that way. Have you ever stopped and wondered why? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Some of your biggest adult struggles may have nothing to do with adulthood at all, and everything to do with your childhood. And what most people never realize is this: healing doesn't always begin by changing your habits, your mindset, or your relationships. It acutely starts earlier with your inner child, the version of you that never truly felt safe, seen, or deeply loved. In this video, we're going to explore the 7 signs your inner child may still be hurting, and what inner child healing can actually look like in real life. But before we jump into the signs, let's take a moment to understand what the term inner child actually means, and why it may be affecting more of your life than you realize. Your inner child is not something strange or distant. It's actually a part of you that you already know very well, even if you don't recognize it consciously. It's the emotional part of you that was shaped by your earliest experiences, especially the ones connected to love, safety, criticism, rejection, and belonging. Maybe you learned that love came when you were useful, quiet, successful, agreeable, or easy to deal with. Maybe you learned that your emotions were too much, your needs were inconvenient, or your mistakes made you less lovable. And even if you don't consciously think about those things today, your body may still remember them. That's why inner child work matters. Because sometimes your adult reactions are not really about the present moment. They're old emotional wounds being touched again. And once you start noticing these patterns, you can begin learning how to heal your inner child with more compassion instead of shame. Okay, so let's start with sign number 1. You constantly need validation. For example, you post something online, send a message, share an idea, or open up to someone. And then the insecurity kicks in. You wait for a reply. You check your phone. You replay what you said. You wonder if they liked it, if they understood you, if they're upset, if you did too much, and suddenly your peace depends on someone else's response. A lot of people think needing validation means you're just insecure. But in inner child work, it can come from a place where love felt conditional, as if you had to do something, be something, or prove something in order to receive it. Maybe as a child, you felt most accepted when you behaved well, performed well, got good grades, stayed quiet, or made other people happy. So now, as an adult, compliments can feel like oxygen, and criticism can feel like a full emotional collapse. You may find yourself needing constant reassurance in relationships. You may feel anxious when someone seems distant. You may overthink a short reply like, "Okay," as if it's a personal attack. And let's be honest, sometimes one dry text can turn your brain into a detective agency. But underneath that reaction, there may be a younger part of you wondering, am I still loved? One small practice for inner child healing is to pause and ask yourself, what am I needing right now, approval or reassurance? Because those are not always the same thing. Sometimes what you're really craving is not praise. You're craving emotional safety. And once you start seeing that, you may notice another pattern that often follows validation seeking very closely. So now, let's move into sign number 2. Sign number 2. You're terrified of rejection. You tell yourself it's just a text. Just a date that didn't call back, just someone saying no, just a friend being busy, but somehow your chest tightens, your mind starts spinning, and suddenly a small moment feels much bigger than it should. That's often how an unhealed inner child responds, because to a younger part of you, rejection may never have felt small. Maybe you overthink messages before sending them. Maybe you avoid putting yourself out there. Maybe you don't ask for what you want because hearing no feels too painful. Not because you're weak, but because somewhere deep down, rejection doesn't feel like information. It feels like proof. Proof that you're not enough. Proof that you're not chosen. Proof that you're not wanted. And that can come from early experiences where you felt unseen, criticized, emotionally abandoned, or made to feel like love could disappear at any moment. In inner child work, this fear makes sense. Your nervous system may be trying to protect you from feeling an old pain again, so instead of risking rejection, you stay quiet. You don't apply. You don't say how you feel. You don't take the chance. And then you call it being realistic, when sometimes it's actually fear wearing a very professional outfit. One way to start healing inner child wounds around rejection is to remind yourself, rejection is not always a reflection of my worth. Sometimes it means not aligned, not available, not now, not the right person, not the right opportunity. But it does not automatically mean you are not good enough. And when you begin to believe that, you may start seeing how much of your life has been shaped by trying not to disappoint people. Which brings us to sign number 3. Sign number 3. You people please without realizing it. Have you ever said, yeah, no problem at all, while a tiny part of you was internally screaming, actually, this is a problem? You smile. You agree. You keep the peace. And somehow everyone seems happy except you. If that sounds familiar, your inner child may have learned very early that being easy, helpful, or low maintenance was the safest way to receive love. People-pleasing doesn't always look obvious. Sometimes it looks like saying yes when you mean no. Apologizing for things that aren't your fault. Feeling guilty for needing rest. Feeling responsible for everyone's emotions. You tell yourself you're just being kind, but kindness without boundaries can slowly become self-abandonment. And yes, your calendar usually notices before you do. In inner child work, people-pleasing often comes from environments where conflict felt unsafe. Maybe being good kept things calm. Maybe being quiet avoided criticism. Maybe being useful made you feel wanted. So now, as an adult, disappointing someone can feel almost dangerous, even when logically you know it's okay. That's why inner child healing often begins with learning that disagreement does not mean disconnection. Someone being upset with you does not automatically mean you did something wrong. And someone not liking your boundary does not mean your boundary is bad. A simple practice is to pause before saying yes and ask yourself, if guilt wasn't here, what would I actually want? That one question can reveal a lot, because the moment you stop automatically choosing everyone else, you may realize how harshly you've been treating yourself. And that leads us into sign number 4. Sign number 4, you're extremely hard on yourself. Some people make a mistake and think, okay, I can improve that. But you, one small mistake can turn into, wow, I'm such a failure. You forget something, say something awkward, miss a goal, or make the wrong choice. And suddenly, your inner voice becomes harsher than anyone else in the room. If that sounds familiar, your inner child may have learned that mistakes were not just mistakes. They were threats to love, approval, or safety. In inner child work, this often shows up as perfectionism. You achieve something, but instead of celebrating, your brain says, okay, but what's next? No emotional high five, no moment of pride, not even a tiny cupcake, just pressure, constant pressure. Sometimes this voice was shaped by growing up around criticism, comparison, emotional pressure, or high expectations. Maybe praise was rare, but mistakes were noticed quickly. Maybe you were made to feel like your value came from how well you performed. Over time, that external voice became your internal voice. That's why healing inner child patterns often requires paying attention to how you speak to yourself. because your mind may still be using survival language in situations that no longer require survival. A powerful question to ask is, would I speak to someone I love this way? If the answer is no, that matters. You deserve to be corrected without being destroyed. You deserve to grow without being bullied by your own mind. And once you start softening that inner voice, you may notice something else. Sometimes the pain is not only in what you feel. Sometimes it's in what you've stopped allowing yourself to feel at all. So let's talk about sign number 5. Sign number 5, you shut down emotionally. Some people cry when they're overwhelmed. Some people talk it out, but others go quiet. They stay busy. They scroll, they work, they clean, they watch something, they answer emails. They do anything except actually feel what's happening inside. If that feels familiar, your inner child may have learned that emotions were not always safe to express. Emotional shutdown doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like saying, "I'm fine," when you're clearly not. Sometimes it looks like laughing things off, avoiding deep conversations, keeping yourself constantly distracted, filling every quiet moment with noise, so silence never gets a chance to speak. And let's be real, social media makes emotional avoidance dangerously convenient. For many people, this pattern began when sadness, anger, fear, or vulnerability were ignored, judged, or dismissed. Maybe you were told you were too sensitive. Maybe your feelings were treated like a problem. Maybe no one knew how to comfort you, so you learned to disconnect instead. Your nervous system adapted. It learned that numbing felt safer than feeling. That's why inner child healing is not about forcing yourself to feel everything all at once. It's about slowly teaching your body that emotions are not emergencies. One gentle practice is to spend 2 quiet minutes a day asking, "What am I feeling?" before I distract myself. No fixing, no judging, just noticing. That's it. Because sometimes learning how to heal your inner child begins with simply letting your emotions exist. And when emotions become safer, relationships can start changing too. But sometimes healthy connection can feel more uncomfortable than chaos. Which brings us to sign number 6. Sign number 6, you sabotage healthy relationships. This one can be hard to admit. Sometimes you say you want love, consistency, emotional safety, and real connection. But the moment someone actually shows up for you, something inside gets uncomfortable. You start pulling away, overanalyzing, finding flaws, creating distance. And often that's not because you don't care, it's because your inner child may not fully trust what feels unfamiliar. In inner child work, this can show up in subtle ways. Maybe you're drawn to emotionally unavailable people. Maybe you lose interest when someone is kind, consistent, and emotionally present. Maybe peace feels boring. Maybe healthy love feels suspicious. Sounds strange, right? But your nervous system doesn't always choose what's healthy. It often chooses what feels familiar, even when familiar has hurt you before. For some people, chaos became normal early in life. Unpredictability became normal. Emotional distance became normal. So now, safety can feel unfamiliar, and unfamiliar can feel unsafe. That's why inner child healing often means learning that peace is not a lack of passion. Consistency is not weakness, and healthy love does not have to feel like an emotional roller coaster to be real. A powerful step in how to heal your inner child is noticing when you want to run and asking yourself, am I protecting myself? Or am I protecting an old wound? That question can change a lot, because sometimes the relationship is not the problem. Sometimes the problem is that safety feels new. And once you begin trusting other people differently, another question appears. Can you trust yourself? That brings us to sign number 7. Sign number 7, you struggle to trust yourself, your feelings, or your worth. Sometimes The deepest sign isn't how you treat other people. It's how little you trust yourself. You question your decisions. You doubt your feelings. You second-guess your boundaries. You wonder if you're too much, not enough, too sensitive, too needy, too emotional, or somehow always wrong. If that sounds familiar, your inner child may still be carrying messages that were never truly yours to begin with. In inner child work, self-doubt often grows in places where your feelings were minimized. Maybe your instincts were questioned. Maybe your emotions were misunderstood. Maybe you were made to feel dramatic when you were actually hurt. So over time, you stopped asking, "What do I feel?" And you started asking, "What do other people want from me?" Little by little, you can become a stranger to your own voice. But here's where inner child healing begins. Not when you become perfect. Not when you suddenly become confident forever. Not when you have no triggers left. Healing begins the moment you stop judging your patterns and start noticing them with curiosity. It begins when you speak to yourself with more compassion, when you honor your emotions, when you set a boundary, when you choose peace over performance, when you stop abandoning yourself just to keep someone else comfortable. And if you're learning how to heal your inner child, remember this: healing usually doesn't arrive like fireworks. Most of the time it shows up quietly, in the way you pause before criticizing yourself, in the way you listen to your body, in the way you say, "Actually, my feelings matter too," in the way you finally start believing that you matter. Conclusion. If something in this video felt uncomfortably familiar, that's not weakness, that's awareness. And awareness is often where inner child healing truly begins. The patterns you've been carrying for years don't define you, but they can keep shaping your life until you decide to look at them differently. So here's what I want to ask you. Which of these signs hit you the hardest? And what's one pattern you're no longer willing to carry into your future? If you feel comfortable, share it in the comments. Your story may help someone else feel less alone. And don't just watch this video and move on. Apply it, pay attention to your triggers, listen to your emotions. Start choosing yourself in small ways, even when it feels unfamiliar. Because the life you want often begins the moment you stop abandoning the parts of you that needed love the most. If this video helped you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you can keep learning more about self-growth, emotional awareness, and inner child work. And if someone you care about needs to hear this, share this video with them. You never know what message might meet someone at exactly the right moment. And before you go, I just want to say this. I genuinely hope this video helps you understand yourself a little more deeply, treat yourself with more compassion, and gives you the courage to start healing. Because your inner child doesn't need perfection. They need safety, understanding, and love. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.